Hello and welcome to Story Spark channel. We hope you enjoy today's story about John, who met my wife Jane through a mutual friend. They got along well and started spending time together regularly. John never really threatened me. He was always pleasant and polite. But when you're sleeping with someone else's wife, you tend to be cautious. They enjoyed sneaking around while I was at work or away. But as fun as it was, something was missing. They told me about it later. It was a December night when they decided to complete the missing piece of their puzzle. Jane invited John over to our place to play cards after dinner. He arrived around 8 o'clock in the evening, and Jane greeted him warmly. She hugged him, which I didn't think was that unusual. After all, they were friends first. We sat on the couch, and I got John a beer from the fridge. When I returned, John and Jane were sitting together, holding hands, and she had his leg. "What's going on, guys?" I asked, as their expressions were like someone who had to deliver some awful news. "What, honey?" she said. "We need to tell you something, but we prefer if you sat down." I complied and sat down. She continued to explain. "John and I have had a sexual relationship for the past 2 months. You see, there was a chemistry between us that was stronger than both of us, and one thing led to another. We care about each other," she reasoned. "I care about you too, and I didn't want to cheat on you, so we have a proposal that we'd like to offer." John picked up where Jane left off. "You see, we can't stop seeing each other. There's too much there to ignore, but we wanted to make sure you were involved in our little arrangement. We'll continue having sex regularly, but you'll be there with us, watching, maybe lending a hand here or there," he said with a smile. Jane continued. "Actually, it'll be a lot of fun for you. I checked your browsing history and I know you like cuckold porn." She rolled her eyes as I blushed. "I saw the searches on your browser, constantly looking up cuck relationships on Pornhub, so I know deep down it's really what you want. Honestly, it'll be better for our marriage this way." John started again. "So all we need from you is to sign a document, just a statement that all parties within the contract agree to these terms." I glanced over the papers that Jane had pulled out of her purse. Some clauses indicated that she and John would be released from any legal repercussions if the agreement didn't work out, and I decided to initiate divorce proceedings. Some points allowed for various forms of physical contact, such as kissing, hugging, and even showering and sleeping together. I sat there with a dry mouth, unsure of what to say. Jane asserted her position. "Look, I love you, but I also love John and what he can do for me. It's not personal, but what he makes me feel. It's not something I can just walk away from. I know he feels the same way about me." John nodded in agreement. "So sign the contract, babe. From now on, it'll be like this." What was I to do? I certainly didn't want a divorce, but I had no idea how I would react to seeing Jane with another man. I looked at the two of them again, their hands still intertwined, but now on her thigh. Jane looked at me seriously and said, "Maybe this will convince you to sign." I watched as she pulled John's face towards her and began kissing him. He responded in kind and placed his hand on her cheek. Part of me couldn't believe what I was witnessing. There was my wife making out with another man. I didn't want to admit it, but the longer they kissed, the more turned on I became. I tried to move away and cover up, but John noticed it first. "Look, he likes it," he exclaimed. It was then that Jane reached out her hand to me. I looked at the contract with the pen in my hand. Inside, I couldn't hide this from them, and I wasn't sure if it was right. I've studied quite a bit about cuckoldry, but it was for a case I was working on. You see, I'm a private detective, and I deal a lot with divorce cases, in addition to the security company I own. Obviously, I hadn't done enough research, so I switched into detective mode, which I'm sure they didn't expect. I pulled out my miniature recorder and pressed the record button. Just to clarify, I would like to record our conversation to eliminate any future disagreements, just for my own peace of mind. Do you understand? There's a lot of legal mumbo-jumbo here. I noticed that both of you have already signed and had your signatures notarized. Yes, said John. We just wanted to save time. We knew you would agree to this. Geraldine, our notary, will be here soon to notarize your consent. Then we can start enjoying ourselves. He beamed like a child on Christmas. Just for clarity, how long have you two been sleeping behind my back? I can't believe I didn't catch on. Jane squeaked. Well, we've been married for 4.5 years, and for 2.5 of those, John and I have had a romance. And please, don't refer to it in such terms. He's my kindred spirit, and all this time we've been in love. Actually, now I'm a little overzealous. Come on, Richard, don't be so self-absorbed. She's loving enough for both of us. I looked at them and realized my marriage was over. I took a pen, made my mark, and stood up. I hope this satisfies you. I showed them the document I had scribbled. Oh, damn it, Jane said, looking at the contract. Sorry, you jerk. I share poorly now. Look here, John. I shook the beer bottle in my hand, pressing my thumb against the mouth. Taking the contract, I folded it and slipped it into my back pocket. Then I aimed the bottle at my soon-to-be ex-wife and the fool who used to be my friend. Removing my thumb from the neck, a stream of liquid hit them both directly in the face. I turned, grabbed my briefcase, laptop, and jacket, and despite demands to come back here and where I thought I was going, I opened the front door. I bumped into Geraldine, the notary. It's your show? You must be Richard. Oh, damn, you're not lying. I sat in my pickup truck and reversed back to the beginning of the driveway. I engaged the drive and turned the wheels left, rolling over the lawn in front of the house and through the rose bushes. Coming off the curb, I clipped the left rear panel of that fool's Lexus. I know I acted like a teenager, but at least he was still alive. I drove to her parents' house. I decided I would take a proactive approach, and although I loved my wife very much, I wasn't going to be the bad guy. My mobile phone was buzzing with messages and texts. Finally, my mailbox was full, and after some time, the calls and texts stopped. I pulled up to her parents' house and got out. I rang the doorbell and soon heard, all right, I'm coming." The porch light came on, and there I was, face to face with her father, Judge Thomas Smith. He seemed to be in a less than pleasant mood. "Richard, what are you doing here at this hour, and where's Jane?" "I don't know where she is, damn it! For sure, not on this damn planet." My in-laws always treated me with love and respect, even though they had a son in addition to my soon-to-be ex-wife. I handed the contract to the judge and placed my mini recorder on the kitchen table. "What in the hell is this?" he asked. "Read this," I said. He started reading and his eyes widened. "Is this true?" he asked. I turned on the recorder, and it all began from the point where I asked if I could record the conversation to avoid misunderstandings. While she played it, his wife listened in, and suddenly the robe she was holding closed came open, and her hand reached for her face, covering her mouth. She gasped, and the robe fell open, revealing a sexy black nightshirt she was wearing. "Well," I thought, "his evening is ruined." He finished reading and looked at me. "I don't think there's any way around this, is there? What would you do in my situation?" His eyes dropped and he sighed. "I understand, son." Just then, their old-fashioned home phone rang. His wife answered it. "Hello, Mom. If Richard's there, I need to talk to him right now." Her father grabbed the telephone receiver. "What's going on, silly? Do you both have some kind of problem?" A scream in surprise came from the other end of the line. "Dad, what are you talking about? This doesn't concern either you or Mom." This is only about me and my husband. You need to get the contract that explains this. Otherwise, you've turned this into a family problem." I heard cries and knew they knew. Her father said into the phone, "Goodbye, Jane," and hung up. Dad turned to me and said, "Go and get some rest. Then do what you have to do. Just don't do anything stupid." "Understood, yes, sir. I apologize for everything. It's not your fault, son. Sometimes a snake just slithers into the garden." I left, got into my truck, drove to the Hampton Inn Hotel, and checked in for a week. I started demolishing the minibar, then collapsed in the bathroom, vomiting all over the floor. I dragged myself, fully dressed, into the shower and rinsed off with the hose, stripping off my clothes and collapsing onto the bed. I slipped into a realm of dreams. The next morning, I woke up and got myself together again. I realized I didn't have clean clothes, so I called another good friend of mine, Gerald, the one who isn't sleeping with my wife, and asked him to buy something fresh and bring it to the hotel room 819. He was a bit concerned about what was happening, so I told him I'd explain everything when he arrived. "Oh, and grab a few egg muffins and plenty of coffee. Hurry up, buddy." Then I contacted my office and instructed 2 of my best guys to start surveillance on Jane and John. I called the bank and froze all my accounts, personal and business. I canceled all our joint credit cards after paying them off. Next, I called and deactivated her cell phone, which was part of my business plan with the company, and then called to have all the utilities shut off at our house. I called my friend who was a lawyer, and she recommended a divorce attorney. My brother is really good if you want maximum carnage. Tell him I sent you. Apparently, it's a sure bet and could be a landmark decision. I called her brother, and around that time, Gerald showed up. I got dressed, and we bought breakfast items. I briefed him on yesterday's events, and at the same time, told my future lawyer what happened and what I wanted. He told me to come to his office with all necessary documents around 3 p.m. We'll strategize there. Gerald couldn't believe his ears. I can't believe she could do that, not just for deception, but to propose a written contract and notarized no less. Tell me about it. I need to do a few more things. I'll get in touch with you later and fill you in. No problem, buddy. I never fully trusted Jane, and I guess now I know why. If you need anything at all, Astrid and I are always here. Astrid was his wife of 10 years and always treated me like a little brother. He left, and I looked at myself in the mirror. I look like crap. Definitely an improvement compared to yesterday. I went out and headed to the bank. I was immediately taken to the office of the senior vice president. I'm not a billionaire, but between my personal accounts and business accounts, it was a significant sum of money. He lunged at me. "I don't understand your actions. Of course, it's your money, and you can do as you please, but is there anything we can do to change your mind?" Guess where John worked? He was a senior financial consultant at the bank, so I placed the contract on the vice president's desk and then turned on the recorder. His eyes clouded over as he read the contract, but when he realized what he was reading and hearing, his face went from pink to transparent. Surely, this must be some sort of joke. If it is, I'm not laughing. I can't continue doing business with an institution where a jerk who's sleeping with my wife works behind my back. My voice rose to a low roar, and I'm sure the surrounding staff heard every word. I took the contract from his trembling hand and grabbed the dictaphone. Curious how many other clients have been treated the same way. Please inform John Samuels that legal documents will soon be served to him. Have a good day, sir. I turned and walked away. As I passed by his office, I heard him bark, "Bring Samuels here immediately." I chuckled. I stopped at the stationery supply point and printed 3 copies of the contract. I thought it best not to show the original to anyone until it was in the hands of my lawyer. Then I went to my insurance agent. Guess whose future ex-wife worked there? I was escorted to the office of the owner, Miss Daphne Lawa. I thought I heard a muffled Richard as I walked through their office. "This is great," I smiled. Miss Lawa stood up as I entered and shook my outstretched hand. "Richard, good to see you. What can we do for you?" She seemed nervous and clearly out of her element. "I suppose you know why I'm here, Daphne. I'm canceling all my insurance with your company, effective immediately, and I would appreciate a reimbursement check right now. I can't do business with anyone who would hire a lying, cheating—" "Just a moment, Richard. Your personal feelings can't influence how my company conducts business. I haven't seen or heard anything." I tossed a copy of the contract onto her desk and stared at her. "Do you need to listen to the tape recording?" She skimmed through the 3 pages and briefly reviewed the notary stamp and signature. A tremor shook the upper part of her body. "Just a moment, please." She pressed the intercom button. "Jane, could you please come to my office right now?" A few seconds later, his clearly shaken future ex-wife entered the office. "Yes, Miss Lawa?" "Jane, you're fired. Clear your desk and leave immediately." Jane staggered, then fainted. Several people approached and bustled around her. Miss Lawa stood up and asked if my decision still stood. I stood up and shook her hand. "It's been a pleasure dealing with a highly ethical professional. I think I can leave my business where it is, Dot." I turned and left, stepping over my ex-wife lying on the floor, and went to the lawyer's office. My lawyer's name was Nathaniel Sampson. He was a bit older than me, but looked younger. He was sharp. He invited me into his office. He asked if I wanted anything to drink, then asked his secretary to bring us some water. "Now, Richard, I've talked to my sister, and she seems to think I'll like this. So what do you have?" I prepared the original contract and then turned on my tape recorder. The recording ended, and he listened to it. But it seemed that he was more interested in the contract. When it was all done, he pressed the intercom button. His legal assistant secretary entered. "Bethany, take this tape recording and make 2 copies. Then put the original in the safe by Mr. Daniels. Get a new cassette and return the dictaphone." He returned to reading and occasionally glanced at me sideways. Finally, he set aside the contract and looked at me. "This is real, isn't it? No one could have made something like this up." He paused for a moment, then looked back at me. "All right, so what do you want to do?" "I want to crucify them. I want to cause them such intense pain that they can't hold down jobs or have any public life together. I want them to pay big time." He smirked slightly and smiled at me. "I've never seen anything like this in my life. I wouldn't pass up the chance to be a part of this for all the money in the world. The first thing we're going to do is bring in a notary and interrogate her. I've worked with her before, and I think she'll be cooperative. We'll have our own notary here, and we'll do everything by the book. Then we'll verify the authenticity of the tape and put it to good use. We'll push for a jury trial and nail them." "Oh," I said, "I think they've both lost their jobs already. I made a bit of a stir at the bank and at her workplace." "Even better. If we just ramp up the pressure, if we get a jury trial, I'll take this on a public interest basis. I'm already liking this." That's the thing. They have no grounds for slander or defamation. We have evidence that everything they said is true. As long as we stick to the facts, they won't be able to do or say a damn thing. Light slowly dawned on me. They dug their own grave. We brought in a notary, and when everything was laid out for her, she went after them. She attested that they also wanted to have their cake and eat it too. Nathaniel arranged a meeting with the judge and presented our case. He shook his head and looked at me. "I sympathize with you, Mr. Daniels. If I can, I'll do everything in my power to make things right. But are you sure you want the jury to hear this?" My lawyer intervened. Your Honor, my client seeks maximum pain and suffering for the woman who technically is still his wife and the man she was involved with. He wants their marriage annulled and her to leave with nothing, absolutely nothing. Very well, counselor, prepare it, and let's see if the other parties agree. We notified the other two and told them to sign the papers or hire a lawyer. They howled. They were almost broke because their utilities were turned back on, and they were unemployed. But she refused to sign, and he was banking on a hefty payout. Finally, they hired some shady character to represent them. They didn't mention the contract or the recording to her lawyer. We scheduled a meeting at my lawyer's office and clarified everything. My lawyer checked the recording for timing and sound authenticity. We were prepared. They showed up at 11 a.m., accompanied by her father. I was slightly surprised and concerned. I shouldn't have done this. Jane approached me as if about to embrace. I pushed back against her advances and mocked my former friend. She started by saying that all of this was a big misunderstanding and that I brought down a holy hell upon them both. They both lost their jobs, were almost broke, and had no prospects for the future. I formalized a waiver of claims and handed over the house to her, but without money, they were quickly sinking. She wanted me back in her life, in her bed, and, most importantly, in her bank account. My lawyer responded with a question. Are you still dating Mr. Samuels? Her lawyer stated that it was irrelevant to the discussion. They're just friends. With those words, my lawyer pulled the contract from the stack of documents and placed it in front of the guy. Let's try this again. He stood facing Jane as her lawyer read the document. Are you still dating Mr. Samuels? She paled and almost fainted. I don't think I want to answer that question. It's too personal. That's fine, Miss Frell. You'll be able to answer it under oath in court. I became increasingly self-satisfied watching their lives crumble. Her lawyer finished reading the contract, and he looked like he was about to be sick. You never mentioned this before, he exclaimed. He turned to my lawyer. These are all rumors. You have no real evidence. That's when my lawyer produced a sworn affidavit from Miss Geraldine Schultz, their notary. He handed it to the lawyer along with a signed and notarized statement from me detailing what was said and demanded. Then he produced the audio recording. This is admissible in court since your clients knew what was happening and willingly agreed to it. My guy pressed the play button and their whole world came crashing down. Their lawyer looked panicked. It was then that her father, the judge, spoke up and settled everything. He slammed his hand on the table and glared fiercely at her lawyer. That's enough, Jane. Mr. Hoodie, you're fired. Jane, sign the blank and get your head out of your ass. Samuels, I want you out by tomorrow evening. Note that you're named as a respondent in the divorce suit. You'd better find legal representation before Richard rules against you. And Jane, I understand you won't get anything out of this. I think if you go to court, you'll get even less. My wife and I are disgusted by you and your behavior. Your brother refuses to bring his wife and kids into our home as long as you're there, so you'd better start looking for another place to stay. Samuels is your kindred spirit, and you preferred him over your husband, so maybe things will work out for both of you. I heard him whisper, I sincerely hope not. It turns out that Jane's parents were paying the bills for her legal representation, so she signed everything while Samuels jumped up and ran out of the room. He vanished off the face of the earth. I have nothing to do with that. 3 months later, I was the only one sleeping in my bed, and I was a lonely man. Well, that was last night. The Jones sisters promised me they would cheer me up tonight, and all day tomorrow. Life is good. Thank you for being with us and listening until the end. If you found it interesting, please subscribe, give us a like, and leave your comments.